All right, well, good morning, and thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. My name is Derek Dioria. I'm the Executive Director of WCEDA, Walworth County Economic Development Alliance. And we're excited this is our 8th annual State of the County. It's become a tradition here that started with the previous administrator. And we're so glad that Mark has agreed to continue this. He's got a big job, and as you'll hear, he and his staff and the Board of Supervisors are really doing a great job. You'll hear a lot of interesting projects they're working on currently or have worked on, and in the future. I think they've been really great stewards of our tax dollars. So with that, I'm going to invite Mark Luberda, our administrator, to come up.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for getting here so early to listen to me. So hopefully I make it worth your time. So I am Mark Luberda, the Walworth County administrator. I'm looking forward to sort of giving you some background of what we have happening in different areas of the county. We have quite a bit that is going on. I'll start with highlights from our 2025 budget. I know we're in the middle of 2025 already, but that really does create our plan for the year. If you want to look at what a public sector entity is doing, look at their budget, because it really sort of lays out what they're up to. And then I'll talk about some of those individual key initiatives in there. And then I'm going to do a sort of a smattering of some of our different programs and projects that are going on, and wrap up with briefly covering some of the impacts of what's happening in the federal government right now. So before I jump into that, I just want to start with a little bit of background and acknowledgments. The background is probably the most important thing people like to hear. We have no debt. That's unusual. The Wisconsin Counties Association puts out a booklet every year and talks about all the details about all the counties, and there's only 2 that have no debt. It's something that the county board is very interested in ensuring continues to happen, and so we plan a lot of what we do, and a bit of the discussion I talk about today, we'll be talking about how we're trying to make sure we can continue that in our levy limit environment. So one of only 2 counties, and we haven't had a debt payment since 2019. We also have received a couple months back our 21st consecutive Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. That's not easy to get, actually. You have to turn in your book, you have to meet a lot of standards, a separate committee reviews all the submissions, and this county has continued to receive that, as well as the Certificate of Achievement for our annual Comprehensive Financial Report. That's the 22nd year in a row. And one that I'm really happy for our Finance Director, Jessica Conley. She actually received the GFOA's recognition for outstanding public service. There were 2 in Wisconsin, and I think only like 27 across the nation or something like that. She does an outstanding job. She's been with the county for a very long time. Became finance director before I got there, but just one of our strongest, smartest workers, and we're all lucky that she sort of helps us do all of the financial stuff that we do, and so I was really excited for her to get that award. So there we go. So the budget theme, I tend to have a theme in each budget I put together, and this one was fiscal stability and operational sustainability. And I'll get into why we started with that, but each year's budget, when I talk about fiscal stability, each year's budget has to be based on sound projections of both the revenues and expenditures. And it has to do that with no structural deficits. What we call a structural deficit essentially is when you're paying for an ongoing operation with a one-time funding source. how am I gonna get it to go after this year? Well, we don't really know, but we covered it, You have to know that your ongoing operations are funded with ongoing revenue sources. That's sort of key to a solid public sector budget. And we have to do that with, at the same time, what I was calling operational sustainability. That's the multi-year look. That fiscal stability is your current year. That operational sustainability is looking multiple years into the future and anticipating actions that you need to do today to prepare for the demands and expectations as they go forward. And you have to do that while you're considering what services and service levels that you're going to maintain. So that was the theme in the book, and that's all doing that within the framework and constraints we have of the levy limits. I mention these every year. Whenever I give my budget presentation to the county board, I talk about levy limits. Since around 2011, counties have not been able to raise their levy beyond net new construction. So essentially, we only are allowed to add additional property taxes for new construction. And they take out the value of anything that was demolished. So effectively, the average property taxpayer has not had their county levy increase since 2011. If your own individual one has gone up, it may be one of the other units of government that are on your property tax bill, because we're only about 20% of your property tax bill. Or it may be that your personal home or business has gone up more in value than the average one. But on average, across the whole, we haven't increased our property taxes for existing homes at all, because by law we're not allowed to. And that means we don't get to keep up for inflation. If you look at the sort of, since we made that last levy payment in 2019, if you add net new construction, the blue line, and if we had sort of increased our primary revenue source to keep pace with inflationary costs that we have to pay, we're about $40 million short that we sort of could have had to maintain operations. So it's a challenging environment to work within. Wrong way. So in that budget, I had the longest title of a subsection I've ever had. It was called The Long-Term Reconciliation of the Imbalance Between Strict Levy Limits and a Strong Capital Fund Balance Position. I was really proud of that title, as you can see. But it's really important because every year I also stand up here and tell you how well we're doing financially, and we are. We are in a very strong financial position. But most of that is we got that way by having sort of a very high level of commitment to strong financial controls. And when we turn money back over, have money at the end of the year, we make sure we put it away so we can use it for capital so that we don't have any more debt, so that we can do all the necessary capital projects that we need to without causing debt, so we retain those net operational savings. So we're financially very strong with those sort of cash reserves and the money to fund our ongoing maintenance and our ongoing capital projects. But we're under those levy limits I talked about. I just showed you the challenge there. Imagine if your business was not allowed to change its prices in 14 years. That's what we're operating under. So when I'm working with my department heads for ongoing, and we're deep into the 2026 budget already, when I'm working with them, I need to sort of reconcile the thinking. How are we so tight on the operations side that we can't add things? We really can't look to add more positions, for example, while we say we're financially strong and we have all this cash. So that's what this budget theme was about, and what I talked to the county board about, what I work almost weekly with department heads on, is reconciling that sort of dichotomy between the two. So the result in this 2025 budget was sort of a planned reduction in the annual levy funding on the capital side, focusing capital on those reserves and being able to use some of the levy that we annually put to the capital project, move those over to maintain the levy. That should be able to get us another 10 years without having to worry about the chance of having to have debt for capital projects. So one of the things we did this year, did it in our budget, is we introduced for the first time a 10-year CIP. So the county's always had a 5-year CIP where we knew what projects we had sort of coming at us. The first 5 years of the 10-year CIP pretty much looks the same as it has historically. That first year is actually committed appropriations that the county board does in the budget. And that's sort of an appropriation that allows us to proceed as staff to move things. Years two through 5 now will actually be committed reserves. In the past, those years we had that plan, but it still showed, the money to fund that still showed as uncommitted dollars in the budget, and really sort of overinflated what we said we sort of had in the bank, because we had these plans for the next 4 years. And so now those are gonna show as committed reserves so that it doesn't look like we just have so much money laying around, but also we're showing the public and we're showing the county board that the money we've got is enough to fund the plans and the projects that we have for the next 5 years. Then we've added years 6 through 10 to show them sort of what's out there, what's coming at us. I think of it as the top of the funnel. The things in there, they can move around a lot. Something can be in year 10, and 1 year later we decide, oh, we've got to move that up, and now it's year 6. It just didn't move to year 9. Or it disappears, or it sits at year 8 for a couple years. It's just not ready to sort of jump down into the queue and get into the first half, the committed funding part of the plan. And one of the reasons that we did that now, and I recommended to the county board that we move that direction, is we actually have a project looming that's in that 6 to 10 year time frame, and that's dealing with the government center. So our main building, right on the square, downtown Elkhorn, you can't miss it. Wonderful sort of 1960s Soviet era construction. But I think it's a cool building the way it is. But and it's been the face of the county for a long time as far as operations go. But it needs a lot of work. I think that our 10-year CIP has like $13 million of projects if we're to maintain that building. It would likely be cheaper. We have land out here. It'd likely be cheaper overall to move out here, but you know, not everything you do from a business standpoint you do just because it's the cheapest thing to do. So the county board over the next probably 5 years needs to make their decision which way to go, because there's going to be some big expenses you'd have to make to stay in that building that you might put off if you think you're going to move. So the 10-year CIP has that secondary strategy of making sure that issue, you know, from 2030 to 2035 is appropriately planned for, so we don't find ourselves with any challenges there. So the 10-year CIP is a major change for the county, and it has a lot of value. In the budget, so when I talk about that fiscal stability, we need to also figure out ways where we can try and budget a little tighter, get closer, not necessarily have more reserves at the end of each year, so that we can fit more within the existing budget space we have. We've done probably half a dozen different strategies since I've been here that have been allowed us to do that. We have a reserve that we set up from excess sales tax dollars we got, that if something happened and the sales tax revenue plummeted, we could pull from that reserve from old sales tax dollars to give us time to stabilize and figure out what happened without negatively impacting our current year's budget. We did something similar in this year's budget for the first time. We call it the Severe Weather Season or Event Reserve. It's hard to predict the weather. Our Public Works Department has to react to it. Probably my experience in local government, the two most important things when you live as far north as we do, law enforcement and keeping the roads open in the winter. That's what citizens want the most. That's my sort of personal opinion and experience. And so Public Works always wants enough money in the budget so that no matter what kind of winter we get, they've got the money to get all the different pieces they need to maintain the roadways. So there's always a compromise, and you find a level you budget at. What we did was we took some reserves from the end of 2023, set them aside in a specific account just for this this fund. That allowed us to budget the winter much closer to the average winter. We were able to cut out $133,000 from the budget ongoing, so that Public Works knew, okay, if we had a bad year, and you can see in the data that we've had 2 in the last 13 years where the department had to go back. So we've just sort of planned for the bad year. Obviously you can, it seems like you get a 100-year storm every 5 or 6 years. So that can happen for us, but we can plan and anticipate that we have to fund these bad years periodically, so let's be ready for that. But we don't have to fund it every year and have this reserve at the end of the year, that leftover money that goes back into our fund balance, into our capitals, and doesn't help our operations. So over the 8-year period, even if we have 2 events where we use that amount of money, I've still managed to save about $800,000 for that regular fiscal stability, that annual budget. We spend a lot of time trying to come up with these strategies in a levy limit environment that helps us work within our annual budget. Another big piece, and I'm going to talk about this only a little bit because I know Derek will talk about it some. For the last few years, the county board has really engaged in the issue of housing strategy initiative, and we have a pilot program in this year's budget, a 3-year pilot program. Last year, when I gave this conversation, I talked a lot about a workforce housing strategy task force that was trying to figure out, okay, what would be the county's next engagement in the housing issue. And WCEDA was working under a contract for the county on that time, trying to promote the issue of housing affordability and communities getting engaged in trying to promote housing development. So we were able to fund, since it's a short-term project, we could use a funding source that wasn't that long-term sort of fiscal ongoing funding, so we could use a one-time funding source for a 3-year period. And the task force came up with some ways that the county continued to engage, but instead of using our own staff or employees, WCEDA was doing such a good job, they actually created an MOU with WCEDA to continue to work on the housing effort. So that's a really important part of our budget that came out of our strategic planning process 2 years ago. And that process then led to what we did with WCEDA right away, what we did in 24, and now it's continuing. It's going to continue for at least about 3 more years. Derek will give you the details of what they're doing. I just want to let you know that that's something that the county's invested its time and money in, but we're using the resources and the professional capabilities of WCEDA. Speaking of WCEDA, another thing that's new in this year's budget, so WCEDA really started in about, I think 2005 or so. The county funded about $100,000 to sort of get them going. And so when I was looking at this year's budget and trying to, you know, start to put the pieces together earlier last year, I thought, well, we're 20 years in. Our funding level as a county was essentially the same. Their staffing level was essentially the same, but they would have some pieces coming that they could do from revenue sources. But there hadn't been, from what I could see in the 5 years I've been here, a lot of sort of reimagining what could happen. So I actually went to a WCEDA board meeting and said, if we gave you more money, what would you do? You know, let's sort of stop and do that same evaluation that happened 20 years before. Is there more we should be doing? And they took that question very seriously and spent a number of months thinking about it. And they came up with a proposal that, I'm not gonna read everything to you there, but for a 2-year program of a little less than $200,000, again, this is a short-term commitment for us. They believe that they could build a stronger WCEDA that let Derek focus more on the actual economic development side, meaning business retention and business creation, while starting some programs that generated a little revenue and help the business community. The county board said, let's give it a go. So that was funded. Again, we were able to use the one-time funding source for it because part of WCEDA's proposal was, if we do this, we think we can make it sustainable with just the annual amount that you give us. So I think that's an exciting development. Obviously, the first go-around of WCEDA 20 years ago was successful because, well, you're all here this morning. So they're still an important part of the community, important part of the business community, important part of bringing new business to Walworth County. And so I'm excited to see what this looks like 20 years from now. I think I missed a slide. So a couple now just miscellaneous projects that I'm gonna run through. One is our Walworth County Shared Ride Transit. It's called Wall-to-Wall Dial-A-Ride. Not really called that. It's actually already had its name changed, but we're really not promoting the name change until September. We're in a big rebranding effort right now. Not everyone knows that Walworth County has a transportation program. It really only got moving about 2017, 2015, 17. It was in very introductory stages. It boomed through 2019 and 20. Then the pandemic hit. Transportation lost like 2/3 of its business, and it's been back on that growing path since then. So since I've been here, I have tried to avoid promoting it. I'll be honest, because I could look at our two closest sort of peers, Washington and Ozaukee County, and see that their usage was far beyond, on a per capita basis, what we are using here. And the thing most people say when you talk about the transit program with them is, I didn't know we did that. But you can call, if you plan it at least a day ahead of time, you can call to be picked up anywhere in Walworth County and dropped off anywhere in Walworth County, except for, because of the federal government rules, you can't be picked up in Whitewater and dropped off in Whitewater because they have their own transit system and they can't compete with each other. But you can be picked up in Whitewater and taken to Bloomfield, or, you know, our biggest traffic is between Elkhorn and Lake Geneva. We do over 40,000 rides a year. But now we're ready to promote it. It's going to be called Walworth County Connect. All the vehicles are going to be rebranded. You're going to see a marketing effort. We want to make sure everybody's aware of it, so that then we can figure out what the real demand is, what the real market is, figure out how much of that we can fund. Do we have to raise the price a little bit and use pricing to reduce the demand? We have to see where it goes. VIP Services continues to be our service provider, but we now have a full-time manager. We have the data so that we can try and be smart about what we're doing. Our individual that we hired a few years back is a 3/4 time person, is now full-time, and he's a certified mobility manager. So he's gone through 3 years of training just to make sure he's got the certification in this area. And this year's budget, we started Sunday hours for the first time. So it started January 12th. We have service from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then we have a new software that is going to help us become a little more modern, a little more efficient, a little easier for people to use. They'll be able to pay online eventually. They'll be able to look on their phone and see where their ride is. So it's an exciting time for this program area, and the county board was really the driver for adding the Sunday hours this year. Another, I don't want to call this new, but this has been a creeping thing we've been doing, and it's really actually a little bit on the forefront of public works technology. And it's hard to make salt and salt brine the exciting part of a speech, and so it never made it in any year. But where we are right now really is pretty exciting. So the graph may be a little hard to see, but the vertical lines are the tons of salt that we buy. It doesn't evaporate on its own. We put it on your roads, it gets washed off the roads, ends up in the ditches, makes its way in the lakes. But everybody knows, for years, you wanted traction on your roads, you put down sand, and everybody realized the sand didn't help, and it wasn't as effective, so they put down salt. Now we actually make, and that's the line, our own salt brine. And we make it, and a lot of the municipalities are now using it, and we make it for them and help distribute it to them. We help deliver it remotely so that they can use it. We have remote stations where our trucks can be more efficient and pick it right up there. It works better than salt. It's more environmentally safe. And you can see how much less salt we're putting in our environment. We had to retrain the thinking of our employees, because someone who's been dropping salt on a road for 30 years knew where they had to just open the thing up wide on this intersection and really lay it out. We have a whole new sort of strategy. When we see the storm coming, you'll see those little lines on the road, you've probably seen them. That's the salt brine that we can lay down in advance. By spreading that work out, we're also reducing overtime, so we're saving costs. It is, Rich Huff, our highway director, public works director, really deserves the credit for just driving this and engaging municipalities. And it's actually a pretty exciting way to be doing it. It's cheaper, more effective, and better for the environment, and you can coordinate it better. So I thought it deserved its moment in the sun for everybody to realize that this is a big deal. And I'm very excited that it's something I've been a part of making happen. Another thing I've encouraged Rich since I've been here is recycling clean sweeps. And he's expanded that program. That's the household hazardous waste, clean sweep, electronics and tires. I used to be the administrator for the town of Caledonia, which is another sort of half suburban, half rural area. And you don't have to manage a clean sweep program when you have rural areas, because you have all these ditches where people can put stuff. That's just not the way to do it. And so every time Rich talked about adding more, and we had some companies that were donating, the landfill operation currently gives us funding that helps us continue to do this. And so we have 2 household programs, June and October. And on those same dates, but the day before, usually on the Friday, we actually have, it's officially called the Business Very Small Quantity Generators and Agricultural Clean Sweep Event. So the DNR has a sort of category for small business that if you generate less than, I think it's like 220 pounds of waste that falls in these categories a month, you're allowed to get rid of it differently. And this is definitely a cheaper program than if they were contracting on their own to do it. And so we're pulling in a lot more material, and we're giving citizens an opportunity to figure out, how do I get rid of that TV? You know, you don't want TVs to end up in a landfill because of sort of the heavy metals that are built into the electronics. So when our last event was just this last Saturday for the household, and I got rid of a TV, a computer monitor, a microwave, and 4 old VCRs, and I had to pay $10 for the computer and $5 for the monitor. Oh, and a printer, an old printer. And now I know this stuff is being recycled appropriately. So they've also added a joint partnership. Waukesha, Jefferson County, and us are all in partnership. So we can go, our residents can go to any one of their household programs as well. So if you find you have your stuff sort of off-cycle, but you really want it out of your house, you don't have a corner of the garage to hide it, you can go to one of their programs and you can access their dates and links and rules right from our website as well. So I think that's another expanded program. This is an example though, it's not a mandatory program. We have levy limits. We used to have some fund balance for this and we got some donations for it, and we've gone from where it was sort of around $17,000 a year to about $40,000 a year. You know, I know I'm going to always continue to try to figure out how to make those added net costs fit into the budget and make some tough choices to offer the county board a solution to keep it going. But some of what we have to do, isn't optional. This is technically optional. But I think in today's society and with the amount of ditches we have, it's really not optional to a degree. So it's an exciting thing we do, it's a service we have, and I don't know that everyone's fully aware of exactly what it entails. So I'm going to speed up for a few things now because I'm running a little long. This is another exciting project. We've got about a 560 acre farm in the county. It's the area in red. There's a, let's see, it's the National Association of Conservation Districts is having their annual conference in Milwaukee, and they're all getting on buses to come down and see this because of what's happened here. This area, you can see I've highlighted where it is on the map. So it's basically west of Highway 67, just south of 43, and it feeds all right into Delavan Lake. And that lake, we all know it's a great lake for recreating, but we also know it's had water quality issues over the year. And this is a large-scale best management program that they've done a variety of things in there and restorations to improve Lake Delavan's water quality. It's a $700,000 program. Our division and the other partners at the municipal level and private sector found all the money to do it, so we didn't actually have to pay for it. We just helped be part of it, coordinate it, and help make it happen. And I think that's also one of those exciting things, is flies right under the radar, and people don't know, but that land's going to be maintained, and what all the sort of chemicals or whatever that would have come from there and the erosion that would have come from there isn't going to happen now. It's going to be an improvement to the lake. Another real quick one, the Register of Deeds land notification program. If you're not aware of this, you can go online and enter information about your property and your name they will notify you if anybody tries to submit any registered documents against your property. There's a variety of scams out there that happen. We've had this program for a year, but it had some limitations there, where you could really only get an email and really only if you had a Yahoo or Google accounts. But it's expanding this year. It's in process. You'll be able to get text messages. You'll be able to get it from about any email source you want. So it's another service we offer that is important that a lot of people don't know about. Another couple of real quick highlights. Our Lakeland Healthcare Center right over there. We're in the middle of an exciting sort of refresh. The county board took a couple years to figure out the best way to do it, what they wanted to do. The building was 20 years old and it was showing it. And so we're remodeling one wing at a time. The first wing is just about done. Should be done probably about the time, I think September-ish. And so it's a longer project because we can do one of the wings at a time, moving people around. But it's, I think, a very exciting program, and wanted to point it out. Alpine Valley Music Theater, you think, why am I talking about that? The county has a primary role in issuing their license so that they can have the music concerts. The last 2 years, there were severe weather events while you've got 20,000 people there, and there are some challenges in the coordination. So the executive committee of the county board that issues the license, we've spent a lot of time with them, and they've been very cooperative partners in sort of establishing some safety protocol at that next level. The reason maybe not all of it was in place is for 10 years it had never happened. And then we had multiple events 2 years in a row. So we've really worked with them to make some changes up there. It'll be a sort of an ongoing process, but it's one of those things we do not everyone's aware of, but there's a lot of safety involved. You hear bad news events about concerts across the nation sometime, and we don't want to hear one about Alpine Valley and Walworth County. Fire EMS Study Committee, I think I've talked to you, mentioned that 2 years in a row now. That's been something all of the communities asked us to engage in, just from an informational standpoint. And the draft report, sort of a preliminary draft report, I'm supposed to see here in the middle of the next month, and it will go to that committee, which has elected officials, municipal administrators, and fire chiefs on it. They'll be getting that probably August or early September. So I'm excited to see that move forward. And then I think one of the largest public projects we've had is the new public safety radio system. That's up and running, and we're in the process now of developing the leases so we can use those towers we use for our radio system to generate funding to pay for the maintenance costs on those towers. So that's part of that fiscal stability, and I'm excited to see that moving forward. Real quickly, reimagining the federal government is what I called it, because there's just been some changes happening in Madison, or in Washington. We're still trying to figure them out. A couple things we believe are gonna happen. The food share program, which is also called SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program. It's currently 100% funded. It looks like the feds have already, in the House at least, adopted some legislation where they're gonna change the ratio of that funding. The feds are gonna push the state to have to do more. They pay out all the benefits between the two of them, but we sort of administer the program. And it seems like the cost of administration for us is going to go up, and we're not sure if the state's going to give us the money to do that. Our Health and Human Services is really sort of a child of the state. We implement a lot of their programs. Sometimes they give us the money to do it, sometimes they don't. There's some concern that within the next 2 years or so, we could have $500,000 bill that we have to figure out how to just administer it. One thing we're pretty sure that will happen much sooner than that is a related program, SNAP Ed, the education side of that. It's called the FoodWise program. That's actually a UW-Madison program, but they're housed out of us. 2 people do it, and it looks like that funding is going to be gone as early as October 1st. That educational component to the FoodWise program, that's the food share program is the largest nutritional program in the nation. And it's not just getting people food, it's getting people to understand food and make the right nutrition choices and educate children and low and moderate income people on the food. And I think those 2 staff members, they're working diligently, and they swear they're going to work right up to the end. But UW Extension, we have 2 people here, but I think there's 120 across the state that do this program, and then we believe that is just ending. And then last thing I have here is broadband equity access and deployment BEAD. The state was getting just over $1 billion to build out the BEAD program. Just June 6th, the new director of the National Telecommunications Information Administration ordered states to rescind all their preliminary awards, added 90 days to the timeline, and created what they're calling BOB. That's a nice name for a federal program, but it's BOB, the Benefits of the Bargain, a new round where they're changing the scope of the program that all the states have been working on and was this close to implementing. So if it moves forward for us, it may not be fiber to the home anymore, it may be satellite. I wonder where they got that idea. But it could be, I'm not saying that's bad, but there was a lot of reason, and the county board actually endorsed a program that was the next level of sort of wired technology. And we're pretty excited, and I believe they had a preliminary award. And so why does that matter? All the colored areas are all the portions of the county that don't have internet access, and all of them were going to be covered by what we had endorsed and what I believe they had a preliminary award for. And may not happen now. So that's actually my last slide. Save the best for last. I ran, I think, about 5 minutes long for you, so I know Derek left a little time for questions, but I think to get through them all, why don't we just save questions to the end so you make sure you get everything? Thank you.
Before we get to our next presentation, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the housing initiative that Mark referenced that we're overseeing. And so, as he mentioned, you know, we started in 2023. It was actually, we were working with the county health improvement plan as kind of an advisory function, and pulled in a number of people that are actually in this room to help with that. I should say too that we do have some information here to the left on the table there, community health survey that I would encourage you to take some information, fill out the survey. It'll help them with what they're doing, but that had led us to this program, and as Mark said, they were able to, the county, we appreciate they were able to extend the contract, which essentially is really funding a position. Pam Carper, I think a lot of you have met her, but Pam, if you could just stand up here, she's been doing a lot of tremendous work. Yeah, so really dedicated, passionate, and the function really has been to get with communities, get our local communities, as Mark said, try to engage them, get with other communities around the state that are working on housing, share all those information, you know, share that information among all the partners, bringing builders together, planners, really get things going. And so just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight here, and we have a lot of information on our website, and we'll send out, we'll send out a follow-up here with links and that, but it's just walworthbusiness.com/housing. There's lots of information over the, even including what we did at the summit and that, but really we talk about, okay, how can we make some things happen? You know, the rubber hitting the road. And so pretty excited to say that within this year and a half plus that we've been working with Pam and that, Whitewater was our first one that we worked with to get a more, what I would call more affordable project going. 38 duplexes, U.S. Shelter Homes, John Sorensen. They're well underway. I should have double checked, but I know those are underway, but they were priced at just under $300,000. So we're excited about that. And then another project that we've been working with Tracy Group is ready to go in the village of Genoa City, which will be 62 units. Again, really close, trying to hit that 300 mark. So pretty excited about that. We've been focusing a lot on single family homes because we do see organically a lot of multi-family apartments and that going up without our help, but it's really been challenging to work on those single family projects to get the price down. And so couple, like 2-3 more that are in the works that potentially could go forward. Can't really talk publicly about that, but that would be love to be able to report that next time we're in the public that those are going forward. SewerPAC had done something for us early on, and we have that guide. It's called Healthy Walworth County, Housing for a Healthy Walworth County. And one of the things they talked about is they projected that Walworth County needs about 5,000 more units, 5,600 I think it was, by 2030 to kind of keep up with the demand. About half of those they're projecting, you know, that we would need that in the affordable range. And so even though we just talked about 100, that's a long way to go to 2,000, but I feel like we've got some really good momentum going there. And so again, we're going to continue working with communities. How do we do that? We try to help them bring builders, share ideas with other communities, bring them some data. Sometimes she's talking with their plan commissions, committee of whole, we want to do more of that. And so one of the things in this new pilot program that the county approved that we did was we established a committee through WCEDA where we have 3 of our WCEDA board members, we have 3 county board supervisors, we have a builder, a SewerPAC representative, and also a municipal representative there, just to kind of advise us, some oversight. Actually, Mark's on that committee too, the county administrator. Of course, myself and Pam are in the meetings, but we developed a work plan that we're going to be working on, and really a big focus of that is going to be the educational component, both with the general public, with the elected officials, and some of the subgroups, builders, zoning, that kind of thing. What we're finding is it's really difficult without trying to create a TIF, which can be challenging, and we're going to hear about that in a few minutes here. So, you know, we're trying to work on what can we do to help communities understand zoning approaches that will allow for more affordable housing to be developed. Also looking at another model, just a sustainable model on how we can partner with municipalities, or they can be partners in the development process. And so those will be a couple of big things. We do have our work plan posted publicly. So if you have any questions on that, you can certainly reach out to us, or we can get you those links. One thing that Pam has been working with, there's a group that really is concerned about workforce housing that she's been working with, and I think I can talk about that publicly, but it's called the Build Hope Foundation. And so I would encourage, anybody that's interested in that to get connected. And I think we have a representative here, so. Jade, if you'd want to stand up, thank you. thanks for what you're doing, and if, you know, you'd like, some of these folks here in the room are definitely interested in housing, you know, it'd be nice to have more people involved in that and see what you can put together, but I really appreciate what you're doing there, so thank you. So yeah, didn't want to get too involved. We could spend a whole session going on the detail, but wanted to let you know that yes, we're moving forward, we're making some good progress, really trying to focus on keeping the momentum going, getting the projects going, working on those single family projects, doing a lot of education pieces where we'll team up with hopefully the Realtors Association, Builders Association, and then a lot of our subgroups that we're meeting with. And would love your involvement, so you know, please reach out. You can attend any of those meetings. They're open to the public. They're posted publicly. Right now we're meeting monthly, but it may end up being quarterly once we go forward. So really didn't have too much more. We'll have some time at the end here for questions, but what I'd like to do now is just tell you about our next presentation. And so really appreciate the guys from Ehlers and Associates who work with a lot of our municipalities on advising financial analyses and advice. And I'd heard the presentation that they had done recently with the Milwaukee 7 group, it's economic regional group. And you know, they had told me, well, yeah, we did this presentation a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, and I said, well, it sounds different, and it stuck with me, but they really were talking about TIF, kind of the trend on TIF being used for housing, and some of the challenges, benefits, things like that, and I thought it would be interesting to present that at this event here, so I really appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you again. I'm Todd Taves with Ehlers and my colleague Frank Roman. Some of you are probably familiar with Ehlers. As was mentioned, we work for a number of the municipalities within the county. I'm a senior advisor with the firm. I've been with Ehlers over 20 years. I had a prior career in local government management, and I specialize a lot of my focus working with Frank on economic development projects throughout the state. So I'm going to let Frank introduce himself quickly, just so you have a little bit of knowledge of our background, and then we're going to kick it off.
I'm Frank Roman, economic development consultant with Ehlers. My background has been in primarily commercial real estate lending, and then on the development finance side for commercial real estate projects. So I primarily do the deep dive into the numbers when a developer is looking for some assistance to make a project work. We work to help us advise the community, does this make sense? Does it work within the parameters? Does it, not too generous, but enough to provide, they call it the but-for test. Does this rationalize public support? So before we start, I just want to say TIF is not a 4-letter word, it's only 3. So we'll kind of help you with why this seems to make sense in what we're doing. So,
well, on that note, just to get a little sense of your knowledge of TIF, how many of you are associated directly with local government units? About half. How many of you, when I say TIF, have no idea what we're talking about? And that's perfectly fine. Okay, so just a real quick overview before we jump in. So tax increment financing is basically the concept of identifying a geographical area. Can be small as a single parcel or development site, could be a large area, and there's various rules and restrictions that we won't go into today, but the basic concept is that you've got an area, and for some reason, market conditions and so forth, it's not developing as the municipality would like to see it develop. So there's a need for a public participation or involvement. That could take the form of installing infrastructure. More commonly in the last decade, it takes the form of providing a direct incentive to the development. And the way it works is the municipal body creates the district. It's always effective as the first of a year, which is when valuations are set. And at the time the district is formed, whatever value is there is frozen and is referred to as the base value. And as you're probably aware, when you pay your property tax bills, part of that's going to your local municipality, to the county, the school district, the tech college, possibly if you're in a metropolitan sewage district. But all of the taxing entities will continue to get the taxes on that base value. So now an investment is made, again, infrastructure, an incentive, something happens, a development that creates new value on the site. All property in Wisconsin is taxed uniformly under the state constitution. So now more property taxes are being generated. So the distinction with TIF is that all of the property taxes paid on the new value above the base go into a special revenue fund at the municipality, and then the municipality uses that to either, for example, pay its debt service, if it had to borrow monies for the projects, to pay current expenses, or as often the case, to provide that money back to the developer in the form of an incentive. So that's what TIF is, just broadly. And what we're going to talk specifically about this morning is housing. Again, I've been creating TIFs for over 20 years, and I would say that when I look at maybe the first 10 or so years that I was doing this work, it was a lot more diverse in terms of what TIFs were for. There was a lot of industrial TIFs. There was a lot of TIFs for office and commercial development, which we're not seeing anymore. I couldn't give you an exact count, but just anecdotally, I would guess that probably 80% of the tax increment districts we've created in the last 5 years have been pretty much exclusively for housing, because that's where the need is. Unfortunately, the way the TIF law is written, it doesn't play real nice with housing all the time, so we have to do some creative things. What we're going to then talk about this morning for a few minutes is how we go about using TIF for housing and what some of the challenges are, how we, as Frank alluded to, determine whether that assistance is really needed, and then maybe what some of the legislative solutions would be. I think when we did this presentation a couple months ago at the M7 group, we had a lot of questions, and that made it a good dialogue, so feel free to shoot questions at us. We've only got like 5 or 6 slides, so I think we'll get through our content pretty quickly, and we'd love to engage with you. So under the tax increment law, there are 5 different types of districts. The 2 you don't see on the slide are industrial, and also one referred to as environmental remediation, which is kind of a special sort of district we don't see a lot. So when we're talking about housing, we're talking about one of 3 types of districts permitted under the law. The first would be mixed use, secondly, blighted area, and thirdly, in need of rehabilitation or conservation. A couple distinctions on these. Mixed use districts have a ability to divert taxes to pay for those costs for a maximum of 20 years. The latter 2 types of districts for up to 27 years. So the way I think about this sort of simplistically is if we're talking about housing development on a green field, so basically land that's never been developed before, that's when we're going to use a mixed use district. If it's a redevelopment situation, or if there are other conditions on the property, environmental remediation is needed, poor soil, something that's a legitimate impediment to development, structures that had to be removed and so forth, then we're often able to qualify it as a blighted area district or in need of rehabilitation or conservation. So these are really your brownfield type situations. And that's why they have a longer life, because redevelopment is more expensive than developing on open, undeveloped land. And so the law allows you more time in which to recapture those costs. So what are the challenges that are associated with housing? I don't think there's anything on this slide that would probably surprise anyone. That's probably why most of you are here and active and engaged. I'm going to have Frank take over in a second, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the first 2 items on the slide, which sort of get into the work that he does as we receive requests from developers for public assistance, and we evaluate the necessity for that. The other thing that I would talk about is, it sounds like you had some conversation about levy limits in the earlier presentation, and I think as you're probably aware, we've been under those limits now for about 20 years. And one of the consequences of that is that it diminishes the economic horsepower of tax increment districts. So when we're seeing properties appreciate at a pretty good clip over the last number of years. There is no ability for a municipality or the county to adjust its levy upward as a result of that economic appreciation. You can only increase it for real new construction. So what happens is when levies are going up at a percentage that is less than the percentage that the fair market value of the tax base is going up, we see the equalized tax rate going down. And so what happens is if you have a mature TIF where everything's already been developed and nothing on the ground is really changing, we can actually see the TIF collect less money year over year simply as a result of the levy limit law. So that is a challenge. There's a lot of challenges associated for local government related to levy limits, but this is another one that always doesn't get picked up on. Kind of part and parcel with that is when you have diminished cash flow as a result of levy limits, as well as some of the challenges on the first two items that drive up the cost of housing. It takes longer for TIFs to recover their costs. And most common councils, village boards, if they're contemplating a tax increment district, what they're really doing is they're deferring much of the public benefit of that project to some future point in time. And when we're talking 20 or 27 years, oftentimes that can be a harder sell than if a tax increment district can perhaps recover all the costs and return that value to the general tax base within, say, a 10 or 15-year period. So that's something we're seeing as well, is that many of the projects, especially the redevelopment projects, are projected to require the entire 27 years of assistance, which is a long time to forego taxes for general operations. And Frank, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the first couple items and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, just to piggyback off the last point that Todd made, was that with a longer district, you have a diminished time value of money. So when it looks like you have maybe $20 million is being expended in a 27-year TID, the time, or the net present value of that cash flow is actually much less. And so you see the erosion of buying power, as I mentioned, over time. So we also look at what's the net present value of that cash flow to kind of make it a little bit more sensible to the councils and the village boards. As to the first box there, construction costs, I think we all know that's gone up markedly. I have a study from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from 2020 through mid-2024 that pretty much every one of the inputs for construction increased about 40% across the board. That's staggering. Can you offset that with increased rents? No, your rents are maybe going to go up 3-4% in a good market. So there's a gap there that's expanding now that we're seeing. Also, interest rates, obviously everybody's aware they're not getting out of the 3% mortgages and take on a 6 or 7%, so there's a challenge for particularly construction loans, which have a risk premium associated with them, so the cost of borrowing becomes even more onerous for that. Insurance, I'm not an insurance expert, but that's been a firestorm lately, as you're aware, especially in certain states. Companies aren't even writing insurance anymore. If they are doing it, they're markedly increasing those premiums. So all these things contribute to the pressures on a developer to create a project accordingly. And loan underwriting requirements. Former banker, apologize for that. Back in the day, you could get maybe 80% loan to cost or loan to value. Underwriting requirements have really tightened up over the number of years due to some market pressures, CMBS failures, et cetera. But now, for developers getting 65% loan to value or loan to cost, that's a pretty good deal. I'm seeing 60 or even 55% sometimes, depending on the lender and the product type. So all these things are squeezing the ability of the developer to effectively bring this project to life. Just as an example, we do a lot of work obviously with Mount Pleasant here. These are the projects that we've done in the last couple of years. The developer, you probably know some of these names here. The number of units that are involved, and then just a comment. These are all PAYGO, which is pay as you go. So instead of community providing dollars up front, having to borrow for that, this is the developer will get a certain amount of the annual taxes they pay in, the incremental taxes above that base value, and the developer will have that returned to them to help offset this increase in costs. Obviously, the longer time goes, the less oomph that pay-go structure has, but it shifts the risk of the development costs from the municipality to the developer. That's a very important part. So we try to counsel our clients to try to do the pay-go method if we can do so. There may be some reasons, as Todd mentioned, there may be some contamination or some issues where the community might provide some money up front, but it's usually a minimal amount, and it's usually always covered by the cash flow of the project, and then we also recommend having certain guarantees put in place. So we structure that to protect the community. Another community, just real quick, is Waukesha. In the last couple of years, we've done 6 deals with them for 755 units. So they're very active in doing using TIF for those purposes as well. In their particular instance, they're looking at more density, so they have more efficiency of providing infrastructure and also fire and police services to a smaller area rather than being more widespread. We're also seeing a few, one new product to market is, in the Mount Pleasant example, is a single family rental, which is a new type of concept to southeast Wisconsin. But instead of building apartments, they're building single families, duplexes, or maybe quads, but those are rental, but they're they're not stacked like an apartment building would be. So it's a newer concept. We're seeing how that's going to take off, but it's been prevalent in other areas of the country. So in justifying TIF, again, we're looking for the but for the use of TIF. This project wouldn't continue at its current time frame, quality, and expected use. So we look at the developer's information, the sources and uses of funds, the projected cash flows that they're going to generate through that, what their financing implications are for that, and then correlate that against known market studies for rents and costs, et cetera. And then, again, structuring the support to be more geared towards a particular project so that the developer receives enough money to attract investment capital to the deal, but not unduly enriching the developer on the other side. We hear a lot of, you're just giving developers, fattening up their wallets. It's really a very, it's a risk profile type of examination. With every component goes into development, you've got land acquisition, you've got financing risk, you've got lease-up risk, you've got interest rate risk, you've got all these, exit or sale risk, all these different type of things. Each one of those adds to the return that a developer would expect and has to provide to their investors. So we look at different ways to measure that return to developer. It could be just cash on an annual basis, or it could be the internal rate of return, which is more of a longer term analysis, usually 10 years, and we mark that against what the developers are needing to their, to attract their investors. TIF incentive could be provided for specific purposes. As I've just explained, mostly it's used to create the cash flow that would provide an acceptable return to make this project go forward. But you could look at it another way. You could say, we've got an environmental condition. The soils have to be removed and trucked out and new soil come in. It could be the project is on a small site. You need, for an apartment, you need structured parking. So a typical parking stall, surface stall, is like $12,000, $15,000 per stall. For a structured parking space, that's $25 to $30. So those costs ramp up markedly. Also, could be bringing in infrastructure to a project. There's a deal we worked on recently in the area. I'm not going to mention it, but the community wanted to provide the infrastructure brought to the site so that the developer could price their homes down to a median first-time buyer price, which is almost $400,000 these days. But the community wanted to help bring those type of homes into their community to satisfy that need.
The one thing I would add too is that, TIF, as Frank mentioned, is not a 4-letter word, it's a 3-letter word, but it's politically sensitive. And the statute says that the municipality and the Joint Review Board, which is the oversight body, has to find that but for the use of TIF, the project wouldn't happen as it's envisioned. And the statute provides no clarity on exactly what you have to do to meet that test, so it's discretionary. And so really the work that Frank does and others in our firm do is this is as close of in an empirical way as you can undertake to demonstrate that, yeah, we have very good, well-sounded reasons on why this project would not move forward, and here's the report, here's the metrics without TIF, here's it with TIF. So the law doesn't require this type of analysis, but we strongly recommend to the municipalities that they work with that they undertake this sort of an evaluation anytime TIF is in place, so that the public as well as the decision makers have some confidence that it is truly supported and needed.
So not only do we have cost increases and things to mitigate, but also when we're talking about affordable housing, naturally that's going to require lower rents than what you would call for market rate. Some people say luxury apartments, but market rate projects. We did a study a couple years ago for community when they said, none of our people that work here can actually live in our community, and that was really a political motivation for them to see what they can do for affordable workforce housing. And so we looked at, what if we took 20% of the market rate units and made those at the 80% AMI or area medium income level. And WCEDA with an H has charts that specify the rents that can be charged and those type of things for 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, et cetera. And what that study showed was that lowering the rents reduces the value, which reduces, because you don't have the firepower, the rental capacity to provide that income stream, reduces the value, which reduces the loan amount that you can get, and it thus requires more TIF and more equity to make that project work. So it's a balance of what you want the community to have and what the financing can provide. So that's the push me pull you, if you would, for those old enough to remember Dr. Doolittle. So that's the concern there. And then currently, TIF law allows for a 1-year extension for housing at the expiry of the TID term. So after 20 years, you have some funds available. You can extend that district for 1 more year. That year's funds have to be utilized 75% for housing in the community. So it doesn't have to be for construction necessarily, but it has to be used for affordable housing. There's talk in Madison, I've been to Legislative Day over there a couple times, where they're looking at trying to extend that to a 3-year term, which would, again, bring more power to the program, but as of right now, that's still in discussion, hasn't been passed. So.
I'm going to wrap up by talking about, I mentioned at the onset that the TIF law doesn't play well with housing, unfortunately. I'm not going to go into these in great detail, because unless you're somebody that's living in the TIF law every day like I am, you'll find this probably really uninteresting. But it's a lack of clarity, a lack of flexibility, some things that the Department of Revenue has interpreted the law to mean that have become a bit of an impediment, as well as this 12% value limit. There is only a certain amount of value you can have in TIF before you are then precluded from creating any new districts, and particularly in smaller communities, they tend to hit that pretty quickly. But I'm going to talk about what some of the solutions would be. So, those of you that may have an opportunity to talk to legislators or through other professional associations you work with, these are some of the things that we've recommended to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. that they have pursued. Some of these made it into the governor's proposed budget, which really never means anything because the JFC starts over and ranks their own budget, and generally you're not going to see TIF items in there. But there's also some sense that we could see a separate TIF bill if there is in fact nothing in the budget. But I talked in the mixed use district, which is the only type that allows true newly platted on open land type residential development. It's limited to 35%. And usually the TIFs are for the housing. So under the current law, we have to kind of over-engineer the size of the district, add land we don't really want to, and then say we're going to see commercial or industrial development that everyone knows really is not going to happen. It's kind of foolish, in my opinion, if housing is the issue, why we just don't allow housing to be done in a TID without having to have that other use. So that would be good to either allow for a pure housing TID or to at least allow the housing to be a much more substantial portion than a third. Couple upper right ones are some technical things that I think introduce some risk for municipalities based on how DOR interprets the law. Another limitation in the lower left is that a successful TID can transfer dollars to a TID that may need some additional horsepower. However, mixed-use districts are categorically excluded from receiving shared increment from another TID, and it would be nice, again, to have them be eligible recipients, particularly when we talk about things like the affordable, where the project is just not going to generate enough tax increment in most cases. Frank mentioned the affordable housing extension, 1 year right now. So if your TID was generating $250,000 a year in incremental taxes, that last year you could take that $250,000 and apply it to housing within the community with some income restrictions. That would be much more potent if it could be extended to 2 or 3 years. One of the best ways to get an affordable project done is not to use TIF. And if you've got some cash you've accumulated from closing a successful TIF, just deploy that. One, it can be done up front, so that's more beneficial to the developer. But then you avoid this scenario of creating a TIF that's going to have a very low cash flow and probably need to run out for the entire TID term. And then lastly, there's always talk about increasing the 12% limit. It used to be a bifurcated 5 and 7% test, went up to 12% about 10 years ago. Now it's, people say move it to 15%. The practical reality is large communities don't have an issue. Because even if they have 20 or 30, I'm thinking like the Green Bay, the Oshkosh, the Racine, the Janesville, these are communities that have 20 or 30 active TIDs, and they're like at 6 or 7% of their total value because their tax bases are billions of dollars. The ones that have the issue are the small communities, many of them in your county, and even increasing that EV limit is only going to help a selected few. And so one thing we've suggested is that if you're a municipality under a certain population or evaluation threshold, you could simply have like a whole harmless amount of TIFs you can have. So you can always have 3 active TIDs at any one time. I think that would give a lot more flexibility. So we'll see what happens, but I think one of the main takeaways is that as people that are involved in this space every day, working with municipalities, working with developers, trying to get deals done, the law's clunky, it needs to be fixed. I think everybody knows that, but it's just difficult, as we know, to get things done in the political environment today. But a solution to housing, in addition to a lot of the other great solutions that are out there, is to make the TIF law more user-friendly to housing. Just a couple links, and my understanding is this presentation has been sent to you or will be made available to you. We host our own public finance seminar each February where we bring in speakers on a number of topics, and we had Brian Dudna in from Sheboygan and Josh Shulman, county exec, now gubernatorial candidate from Washington County, that came in and talked about projects that they're working on in their county to promote housing. Nothing really earth-shattering there, probably some of the same things you've talked about. Narrower lots, smaller houses, use of TIF. I think a couple notable things in both cases is municipalities, especially smaller ones, struggle to do anything on scale. They don't have the resources, and a lot of times when you have that county partner, and in particular in the case of Sheboygan County, and I'm forgetting the dollar amount off the top of my head, but I want to say it's like $10 million or so that they received as a capital infusion from Kohler Company and some other major employers. When you can do these things on a county level or regional level, they become far more effective. So if you're interested, you can click on the links in those. In our slide deck, it will take you to the decks that were presented at our seminar earlier this year. You might find what those counties are doing to be interested to you as well. So we will conclude, and if we've got any time left, we'd be happy to answer questions.
I have a question. So do TIFs always recover their costs, or is there a percentage that fails to do so?
Well, the answer is it depends on the financial performance. I would say by and large, we see tax increment districts recover their costs, but there is certainly the possibility that they don't. And if they don't, it's the municipality that shoulders that, whatever that liability is at the end. A lot of it is, doing that front end planning. The other way we really mitigate that, we use that term pay as you go a couple times. And again, what that means is we don't give the developer money up front. What we tell the developer is, you do these things, and we will give you part of the taxes that you generate back over a period of time. Always other risk, execution risk, you want to see the project happen, but from a financial standpoint, the developer doesn't perform, they don't get as much, or they don't get anything, and so it eliminates that possibility of the taxpayers holding the bag at the end.
My question is I can see how in the short term TIFs and TIDs might look pretty attractive, but what's your take on using it or what's your take on the long-term economic viability with it, considering the trickle-down effect? If these things are for 20, 27 years, and by then we have some potential significant economic or physical obsolescence, and you already have that diminished time of money, does it really make sense for workforce housing?
Yeah, I think you can look at this a couple ways. So because of the work we do, we tend to focus on the property tax aspect of it, or that part of the equation. And I think you're exactly right. A lot of the discussion I hear when we present our report and we say it's going to take 27 years to recover the cost, the question is, well, what are we going to have at the end of 27 years? Are we going to have a property that's functionally obsolescent? Is it really providing any value? The other challenge associated with that is, again, the property taxes don't go to the community during that time frame. There actually is, under the levy limit law, benefit to development that even happens within TIFs, but part of the challenge is if the municipality harnesses that allowable increase in the levy, it's spread across the taxpayers that are not in the TID. So, the operating costs go up. But the fundamental reality is deals are not getting done in many cases without TIF. So it's a value proposition, right? Does the community see enough economic benefit beyond the property taxes that they're foregoing for 20 or 27 years to participate in any event? And that economic benefit can be that, it's the housing itself, the fact that they need housing in the community or the region to support the major employers. So when you look at the but-for test, again, we tend to focus very much on the property tax aspect of it because it's more quantifiable. But the law does say that you have to look at all the economic benefits. So I think in a lot of cases, the reason that municipalities accept these deals where they're foregoing taxes for so long is they see the tangible benefits of the housing beyond the tax revenue they're foregoing. I would say, again, our job is to bring the facts to the decision makers, so I'm not sure if you're asking me what my opinion is.
Yes.
The way if I was putting myself in the position of an elected official and having to make these decisions, I think the question in my mind is, if we don't do anything, is it practical to think that is something going to happen down the road? Economic conditions aren't great right now, so, another thing I will hear at meetings is, what happens if interest rates go down in 2 years? Is that going to make the dynamics better? Construction costs, are they going to go down? I don't know, probably not. So it's that question, is there going to be a better time to do it, say 2 years from now, what are we missing in terms of opportunity in the short term, and is there, again, enough of benefit to do it now? By and large, we see municipalities proceed with these projects, and again, I think that's because they hear the need for the housing, and there's really no other way to get the deals done. So that's about the best answer I can give in terms of the way I see it and what we're seeing.
Can I add one thing to
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
I think when we're looking at an economic development project anyway, you're looking at, for example, if you have an environmental parcel contaminated, is generating no tax revenue, putting a project on that site will help raise the tax base of the community. There's a lot of downtown or near downtown apartment projects going on to reestablish downtowns. We all know that a lot of downtowns are, had some challenges. So I think communities are trying to focus on revitalizing. So in that respect, I think it helps on the longer term. You're bringing up a community rather than letting it deteriorate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any sense of the appetite of the legislature to take your advice on those suggestions?
So every year, the league enlists sponsors. There's been a number of TIF bills with helpful things that have been introduced over the last several sessions, and they just never make it to the finish line. And in my recent conversations with Tony Herkert from the league, they have a sponsor that is willing to bring forward a bill. I don't know that it's been drafted at this point. Everyone's focused on the budget right now, so honestly, I'm not optimistic we're gonna see anything get done in this session. That's just my take on this. It would seem to me that I think, most folks in the legislature here, whichever side of the aisle on, they know this is an issue. They hear this from their constituents, from the communities in their districts. So you would think that there would be some bipartisan receptivity to some overhauls. There's also an element of the legislature that is very anti-TIF, in particular, a few specific legislators. So sometimes all it takes is a small faction that's vocally opposed to kind of prevent some forward progress. But I would just say we'll see. But we get things done, we figure it out, we work with what we have, but it could be a lot easier for everyone if we had some relatively small changes or enhancements in the law.
I've got a question for Mark. Obviously, it's wonderful that we're debt-free, so you're saving a lot of money and not doing debt service. How much money are we generating from investing, the excess funds that we have in all these different places?
I'll say a lot. I don't have the exact number, but it's right now, I think, in the millions, because we do have a large amount of reserves. We invested well. Our finance committee reviews, I think, quarterly our investment practices. Even like the ARPA funding we got from the federal government, that alone over the period we've been holding that as we've been finishing these projects has generated about $1.5 million of interest that we're using for some of those projects. So interest revenue is a very important part of our earnings. Even when we collect property tax dollars, we do a lot of holding of them and then distribute them to the municipalities. During that period we're holding them, they create a lot of earnings for us. That's a big part of our budget, and it's, I believe, in the millions. Low end of millions, but millions.
Just real quick, the approval process of a TIF and TIF, it's not just up to the council of the municipality. Can you talk briefly about the approval of the different groups that are part of that?
Sure, there's a joint review board which has a representative from the municipality, the school district, the county, and the technical college, and then it has a fifth member of the general public. And that body ultimately has the final say on whether the municipality can create the TID. So procedurally, that's the joint review board. That body must meet first to organize itself. That's usually when the municipality will kind of give the overview of what they're proposing to do. It then has to go to the municipality's plan commission, or if they have one, it could be their community development authority. It's the subject of a public hearing. the body has to act to approve that and move it to the village board or the common council. If it's approved at that level, then it goes back to the joint review board for the final yes or no approval. And with the pre-planning that takes place on the front end, doing the type of work we do, we usually tell people it's like minimally a 3-month process, oftentimes a little more than that to get a district in place.